Hi, my name's Ralph Woodward. This is my colleague Bridget Hardy, and we together are performing Schubert's wonderful cycle, Die Schöne Müllerin, which means the beautiful mill maid, in Cambridge, England, on April the 27th, 2019. And we're just making a few little films to give a bit of background, hopefully to encourage your interest in the piece, and I hope you might come and listen to us perform it. So, Bridget, do you want to tell us a little bit, just a brief outline of the plot and the characters involved?
Yes, well, it's a cycle of 20 songs, and Schubert set them to poems by Wilhelm Müller, and that is just a pure coincidence that he was called Müller, and the song cycle is about a miller. So, the song cycle tells the story of a young miller. He sets off on a journey, could say a sort of wayfarer type thing.
Road trip.
Road trip, that's right, goes off on a road trip and he finds a brook, a little brook, decides to follow the brook. Quite logical, as it might well lead to a mill, which in fact it does. He ends up at a mill and falls in love with the miller's daughter, Die Schöne Müllerin of the title. And he thinks it's reciprocated, things are starting to develop, and then along comes the huntsman. And the huntsman sort of represents everything that is masculine and virile and all the rest of it, and the müllerin falls for the huntsman, and that starts the miller's decline into despair and jealousy, and the cycle ends with a lullaby sung by the brook as the young man, well, we presume, drowns himself in the brook, so all does not end well. Sorry to give that away. So we could say as well there are four main characters in the cycle. So the miller himself, and he's the central character. He's sort of slightly effete, quite a fragile kind of character, always questioning and doubting. The maid, the müllerin, who doesn't actually speak much, but you could say this is standard 19th century idea of females being admired from afar but not really listened to. And then there's the hunter, representing everything that is virile and the fertility aspect, etc. And then also the brook itself is given a character. The brook runs through the cycle and speaks, you could say, actually speaks in the last two numbers, but is present in the piano part throughout the song cycle.
Yes, you could, I mean, right from the second song we get this sort of babbling brook motif. And later on you have... So the mill is the brook, sorry, is like an audible presence during the cycle, but then as Bridget says, towards the end it actually speaks and becomes a character in its own right.
Yeah.
Now, another aspect that's interesting, we think, is the whole thing about colour and colour symbolism. So the miller is described on more than one occasion as white, which is partly perhaps to do with his clothing, partly to do with him being covered in flour, and also partly representative of his kind of wanness, gentle paleness. So to some extent it plays into sort of earlier poetical stereotypes which were largely about women. So it reminds one, for instance, of Ophelia, kind of drowned in a pool. So there's a kind of deliberate subversion of norms there, if you like, if that doesn't sound too pretentious. Well, even if it does. Then Bridget's mentioned the kind of virility of this huntsman who comes and turns the miller maid's head, and he is very strongly associated with the colour green. You know, probably wears green. He is very much of the woodlands. And so there's this tragic moment where the miller gives the maid a green ribbon to wear in her hair, and she's very fond of green, we are told. What he doesn't yet realise, and it's only just starting to become obvious to us, is that her fondness for green is because she has her eye on the huntsman. So there's a kind of tragic situation developing. Interestingly, the movie La La Land, another work of art in which colour is important, there is a moment where a green ribbon is mentioned. So next time you're watching the movie, keep an eye out for that, and I'm assured that it's quite likely that that was not a coincidence and that that little moment in La La Land is a reference to Schubert's Die Schöne Müllerin. So there you go. And then blue is important. Blue, the colour of the brook, the colour of the flowers by the brook, the colour of the beloved's eyes, and in the end the colour of the sky overhead, in other words, eternity. So it comes to represent death, as the miller kind of finds the logical conclusion of his journey in total oneness with nature, i.e. death by drowning. So, that's enough talking from us. We're going to play you now a little excerpt of us rehearsing one of the movements, and it's the one I was just talking about. This is Mit dem grünen Lautenbande, in which the miller gives the girl a green ribbon. At that point, he is still happy. I'm afraid there's bad news to come.
Schad das schöne grüne Band, das es verbleicht hier an der Wand. Ich hab das Grün so gern, ich hab das Grün so gern. So sprachst du, Lädchen, heut zu mir, gleich knöpfigsam und sehr